Okay. So what I want to say is we are going to have a test on Wednesday. It's going to open up at midnight. It's going to close at 11:59. There will be 50 questions. The 50 questions themselves are worth 67 points because of those. There's some questions where you have to either write a short essay or name something or do something interactive, right? Then there are 18 questions that are listed as multiple choice, but there's also a little phrase under there that says show your work, and then it gives you a point value. So those 18 questions have a variety of point values for the work. You get 1 point for the answer, whether it's right or wrong. Well, if it's wrong, you don't get that point. And then there's questions, some will be, you show your work, it's with 1 point. There's a combustion analysis, which is show your work, it's worth 6 points, right? So it ranges between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points for the work. Now that work needs to be complete in that I need to see everything that you do, all of your logic from start to finish. So try to do it in a very neat and orderly fashion. Show your units, show your calculations.
Oh, okay, I'm in a class right now, so hold up.
Show all that stuff. You need to, this is important, okay? So I randomly bounce questions around on the test. So what you need to do when you answer the question is on that piece of paper, you need to do a key phrase. Like you have to do, compound X atomic mass calculation, and then you're going to show your work. You can't even give me your number. You need to give me a keyword or a key phrase. Like there's one that deals with oleic acid. Or, so you want to give me that key phrase, because otherwise I am bouncing around trying to figure out what work goes to what question just by numbers. And I can't do that. I mean, it's like crazy. So you'll have 180 minutes to do that. Your show your work document needs to be submitted within 15 minutes of your submission of your test, and there's a separate file. So your test score is out of 67 points, and there are questions where I have to go in and grade. So it's not going to populate with an answer until I check those ones that I have to grade. And then the show your work file is worth, 52 points. So that is in an assignment. That is in an assignment link in the exam module. So at the very top of Canvas, on July 1st at midnight, the module is going to pop up. And the two things that are in that module, which is the exam and the show your work submit box, those are both going to pop up at midnight. And then they're all going to disappear at 11:59. So make sure that you take that into consideration, because everything's got to be done by 11:59 on July 1st. Okay. For those of you who have a accommodation, I will be putting those in there as required from your plan. So I will go ahead and do that. I haven't yet, but I will do that shortly before I forget. And then you do have to sign sort of an academic honesty agreement. In the first part, in the instructions on the test, there's an academic honesty agreement that you need to read. When you submit your work, you're going to sign and date that work, which is an acceptance of that academic honesty agreement, which basically says all you're going to do is use your test and your notes. You're not going to use the internet. You're not going to help anybody else. Everything is solely your own. The resources that you can use are going to be your book, your notes, your PowerPoints, anything like that. No outside internet sources. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Have I left?
So is this test, you said,
Go ahead.
sorry, is this test only on chapters 1 through 3?
Yeah, it's modules 1 through 5, right? So our book sort of bounces around a little bit with all that. So there is going to be some questions like the stoichiometry, all that kind of stuff, which is still, I think, in chapter 3. We're not going to do on this test. So it will correspond to the sections in the test based on the modules. And I think I gave sections from the textbook that sort of referred to. And the types of problems that you'll see will be from mastering chemistry. A lot of the multiple choice that are straight multiple choice, some of them are more conceptual and less mathematical. All the show your work material, that is all mathematical problem solving. And like I said, there's 18 out of the 50. And then there's some other type of essay questions and naming and stuff that also you write. They give you a space to write everything, and then I'll go in there when you submit your test, and then you'll see what you got on the multiple choice, the straight multiple choice part. But you won't, I don't know if it'll register until I actually go in and grade your attempt on each of the exams, right? You only have one shot at this. There are no multiple submissions. You cannot start and stop. Once you start it, you have to finish it. Only one question is on your screen at a time. Once you submit your answer to that question, the answer is locked and you cannot go back to it. I think those are the only restrictions. So it is timed. You start, you stop, you're done. Okay? And you can't go back if you've submitted an answer, which is not ideal, but it is the consequences of being an online course and one way to try at least to keep people honest. What the heck happened to my cord? Oh. Trying to keep everything charged and in the same place is just ridiculous. All right, let's see. All right. Are there any other questions on the test?
So what if you don't submit an answer, but you wanted to go forward, you still can't go back, correct?
You know, I'm not sure because in the test profile, it says lock the answer once submitted.
Okay.
So I am thinking that until you submit your answer, you can go back.
Okay.
But this is the first time I'm doing it this way on Canvas in this format, so I don't know. That
Okay,
makes
thank
sense?
you. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions on the test?
Yeah. So when we upload our work, we upload it to the one, like the separate one, like the show your work part. We just upload it to that.
Yeah, so it'll be a file submission. So you should do, what I was envisioning is that you do all your work on your paper, and then you're gonna scan that and upload it to that file submission box, just like the lab reports and that kind of stuff. And again, you're going to encounter some of these questions in different orders than other classmates. So what I really need you to do is to put a keyword or a key phrase on the top, like combustion analysis, and then show your work, right? Something that gives me, okay, I know these questions now pretty well because I've been going through everything and making sure everything's ready. But I really need you guys to sort of help me out, because I made this mistake with another class in the spring, and it took me hours to figure out what question was where, because everybody had a different question and all I had was sheets of numbers. And I'm like, no. You guys got to give me at least some direction as to what it is that's happening on your piece of paper that you're submitting, if you don't mind. You guys feel like you're ready?
Uh,
Some of the mastering chem questions for, let me find the mastering chem homework that it was, but it was like the combustion analysis questions, and it would say there's like a compound that only contains hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon, and it would say it had like released some mass of carbon or some mass of CO2 and H2O. And then you could find, using stoichiometry, the amount of carbon, hydrogen, and then subtracting from the entire mass of the compound the mass of the oxygen.
Right.
But then, so those ones I knew how to figure out, but then the ones where it would say, oh, and it also included nitrogen, that's when I was like, okay, now I don't understand how to figure this out, because it's only giving me CO2 and H2O, and now I'm like, well, where's the nitrogen coming from, and what do I have to do with the oxygen component of it? So those ones I like got wrong because I didn't understand. So it was number 5.
Was it C? I think I remember that question. It just had carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen though, right?
Yeah, it was on module 5 of the mastering chem.
But the question just said carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do that exactly the same way that you do that with the compounds containing oxygen.
Okay.
Because
I was trying to do it that way, like adding together the mass of the hydrogen and the mass of the carbon, and then subtracting that to find the mass of the nitrogen, because it's like, oh, it only contains the nitrogen, so you don't have to worry about the oxygen. But I don't know, I kept getting them wrong.
Okay, so you're doing it right though. That's exactly how you do it. The molar mass of nitrogen atom is just 14. So if you were using the molar mass of N2, for these problems, you're using the atomic masses. So that's one thing I've seen that people tend to do with these questions. The more common answer, especially with combustion analysis, is that people just don't carry their sig figs far enough. It's like, to do these percent composition empirical formulas, and especially the combustion analysis empirical formulas, you want to use a really good periodic table that has 4 or 5 significant figures for the elements. And you want to carry all your numbers in your calculator. And you only want to round at the very, 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 very end. Because when you're looking at empirical formulas, and remember, it's like it needs to go to to whole numbers. So we have that multiplication type issue. If it's like 0.2, I have to multiply by 5. If it's 0.25, something 0.25, I have to multiply everything by 4. Well, those variances are so small that if you round early, you almost always get the wrong answer. So literally, honestly, I do them all on my T84, which I just reach up, with my plus keys and grab numbers, so I don't have to write down 7 or 8 sig figs at a time. But if you don't have a calculator where you can do that, I literally would write everything down. It might take you a little bit longer to complete everything, but it's definitely worth it when those types of errors are so common and can have such drastic results in these types of problems.
Yeah, so like 13 on the module 5, it was about PCBs, and it said that it only contains carbon, hydrogen, and chlorine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like with something like that, like trying to find the mass of the chlorine and then trying to figure out like the empirical formula using that kind of like threw me off. But for some reason, when it was like it only contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, it felt like I was able to get those ones correct more often. But I mean, it could be a problem with rounding. I can like go back through the mastering chem and try to like practice some of the ones that I had difficulty with and see like step by step.
Yeah, there was an example in the last part of the lecture on that material where I did do a very complicated problem, and that had a separate sample, like a second sample that had data, and you also had because there's different ways they can introduce other elements in those problems. You can introduce elements by subtraction if that's the only element there, or you could have a separate sample that looks at and provides data for other elements in the compound. So it depends on the type that you would encounter on the test. But that is why I give you the show your work. Because if you set everything up and it's clear to me that you're going through the procedure and you end up with the wrong answer, most of the time I can figure out why and I'll be able to let you know. But the other thing about that is, the correct answer is worth 1 point. The show your work is worth 6. You know what I mean? So like, even if you go down a garden path because you make a mistake in the calculator or something happens, I can see what your thought process is if you put this, very orderly, like I've been showing you in my own lectures, how I kind of like to have things set up. And then if you do that for all of these questions, you are going to get partial credit. And let me tell you from experience, partial credit is the lifeblood of science classes. It's like no one would pass any science class without partial credit, in my mind.
Do you think for number 13 you could go over the empirical formula part? Because I was stuck on that problem as well, because I didn't get the CL.
Okay.
I was finding CH and O, but I don't know where the CL came from until I reviewed the answer.
All right, so this is module 5,
Yes.
and it's number 13.
Mm-hmm.
3.124.
Yes. 13. Where's the 3.124? Oh, never mind. I got that. Yeah.
Okay, so what did I do with my iPad? Let me find my iPad. Dropping everything left and right today. All right. Now, where are you guys? Okay, I am going to share my iPad with you, and I'm going to write down the data from my screen. Okay. So what I see is a problem. It's going to be number 13 or 3.124. So I have a polychlorinated biphenyl, blah, 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 blah. I have 1.00 grams of my polychlorinated biphenyl, and it contains carbon, hydrogen, and chlorine, right? This amount was subjected to combustion analysis, and I got 2.367 grams of CO2, and I got 0.323 grams of H2O. And what I want is the empirical formula, right? Does that make sense?
Correct.
Okay. So this is going to be done very similar. I only have carbon, I only have hydrogen, I only have chlorine. This amount is going to get me to the moles of carbon. This amount is going to get me to the moles of hydrogen. And as with any combustion analysis problem, that's all I can get from there. I can't get oxygen from either of these values. Just because oxygen is in the formula doesn't mean I can use it, because my oxygen is going to be excess, and there's a lot, I can't do it. It splits into two places. I just can't do it. So this is going to be important. The fact that I have 1 gram total sample. So I'm going to start with my CO2, and I'm going to do, for every 1 mole of CO2, I have 44.02 grams of CO2. And then for every 1 mole of CO2, I have 1 mole of carbon. Does that look right to everyone? So I have 2.367 divided by 44.02. And what I get is 0.053777101 blah, 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 mole of carbon. Everybody follow that? Then I have 0.323 grams of water, and I do the same thing. For every 1 mole of H2O, I have 18.02 grams of H2O, and then for every 1 mole of H2O molecule, I have 2 moles of hydrogen atoms. So I have 0.323 times 2 divided by 18.02, and that gives me 0.035849 moles of hydrogen. And I have more in my calculator, right? And that's what I'm going to use when I'm going to grab it when I go further. So now I have to indirectly figure out how much chlorine I have in that molecule. So what I need to do is I need to take my moles of carbon and turn it into grams. So if I go up to my thing, I'm going to grab my moles of carbon and then multiply by 12.011. And then I get 0.64584 grams of carbon. So that's the amount of carbon that was present in that 1 gram sample, which is up here. I'm going to do the same thing with my hydrogen. And then for every 1 mole hydrogen, I have 1.008 grams of hydrogen. So I'm going to go up with my calculator, grab that, enter, times 1.008, and I get 0.0361358 blah 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 grams of hydrogen. Okay. So this is how I'm going to find my chlorine. I have 1.00 grams total compound minus 0.64584 grams carbon minus 0.0361358 grams hydrogen. And when I do that, so I'm going to take 1 minus that amount of carbon minus that amount of hydrogen, and I'm going to get 0.3180205 grams of chlorine. So this is the amount of chlorine that's present in that sample.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How did you get chlorine from this H2O and CO2?
I didn't.
So you're just taking it from there, and I guess that's where I got lost, was how did that automatically become chlorine?
Because I know the only elements that are present in the compound are carbon, hydrogen, and chlorine.
Oh, okay.
I
Sorry.
know that I have a total sample of 1.00 grams. So that 1 gram has only carbon, hydrogen, and chlorine. So the carbon I can get from the CO2 data, the hydrogen I can get from the water data, but this piece down here, I actually have to figure out how much carbon or hydrogen and then take that away, and what's left is chlorine because that's the only thing that's present, right?
Yeah, I once again read that problem too fast. That's where I
Yep.
keep getting lost.
Yeah. Do you still need me to continue? Does everyone need me to continue? Because now what I'm going to do is convert this to moles. For every 1 mole chlorine, I have, what is it? 35.453. And then this gives me, my phone, 0.00897002 moles of chlorine. So now I have the moles of chlorine, the moles of hydrogen, and the moles, or the moles of carbon, the moles of chlorine, and the moles of hydrogen. So now I'm just going to divide everything by the lowest number, and that's how I'm going to get my answer. So I'm going to divide everything by this guy. So for those of you guys who were struggling, does this make sense now?
Yes, it does. A lot more sense because I was trying to solve for the whole time and it wasn't there.
No. I mean, yeah, you can't solve, yeah. Now
Makes a lot more
sometimes,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, okay, so that's good. Anybody else have any other questions?
I had some questions from the math that we went over in lecture because I went over and studied it, and then I don't know, I just wanted to go over some of them.
The math?
Yeah, like in the lecture problems, we did like some combustion analysis and like some of the mole problems I wanted to go over again.
Do you know which ones they were?
I have the problem written down. Yeah.
Did I not do them in the lecture?
No, you did. I was just going through it and I wrote everything down. There's a part like I got a number in one of them. I don't know where it came from. I guess for one of them.
Well, I could have been wrong too. I'm not like totally perfect. I try to catch that, and I don't edit my videos. I like let you see what I get wrong because I feel like that actually helps you guys too. Is when you know is when I make a mistake, then you guys can see what's happening. I'm trying to close some of this stuff here. Man, it's really, I don't know if my son will have a baseball tonight or not.
It's supposed to storm all night.
All day?
My mom said there's a storm coming soon. So
Okay. So how many of you guys are still with me?
I think there's 6 people.
There's only 6 of us left.
The other people probably got their questions answered and left.
Yeah. Okay, so what type of question was it, Kayla?
It's a combustion analysis. I was going through it and there's a number